Alright everyone, Topman's Tuesday, back again. Now, a little quick one today, because we need to just close off a couple of loops we've been going through with the KPI piece, make sure that we've got everyone, all on the same page. We all know what's going on. The big thing, though, about all this is, of course, to think that you like to know what's going on, and I like to know what's going on. So why don't you take a minute now, go down there, if you haven't already, click like and subscribe, and support the channel. Tell YouTube that you think we produce some quality content, and let us know what you think about these videos in the comments down below. KPIs are one of those areas that you have to kind of be aware of what they're actually doing to your business, as well as what they're reporting about your business. It's not uncommon when I go out into the world of work and work with clients to really see the KPIs driving the business as opposed to the business driving the KPIs. And when you think the point in the name is it's a key performance indicator, it's an indicator of your performance. So, really your performance should be driving what happens in the KPI. But there's stuff at play here, the psychology, the mindset, the actual way that as a human being, we all are. Now, if we have a look at this as an example, this is kind of something that I see quite a lot, right? Just a sample dashboard, just some random figures that are pulled in. This was a sample of the Power BI dashboard I found on the interweb. Okay, this is presented as bob on, dead good, right? No, say I, okay, because there's a psychology here, right? The point of KPIs is they are psychological drivers. They will drive behaviors based on what you see within them. So in here, when you're seeing a red, understandably, it should be driving some kind of an activity towards we need to do something. We need to make the business better. And I think all of us can get behind that. Yes, that makes sense. That is the point of a KPI. A good KPI needs to do just that. It needs to let you know we need to be doing more. Okay? One of the things I talk about a lot is amber is the more important one. What does amber mean in your context of a KPI? Because that's when you should be really enacting pre-agreed, predefined fixing methodologies to change what goes on. It might be a case of saying, we've got a backlog of orders. When it goes amber that we've got too many, we're going to authorize overtime automatically so that people can do some extra hours, get the backlog cleared, goes back to green, we go back to normal performance. We can understand that. The change of it going red is we need to do more. Something else has to happen, right? And that's why I say the amber in my mind is the most important sector because we've got things to do. The challenge is, right, for a lot of things, if we went back to our orders on time, our orders fulfilled on time percentage, for example, there's a lot of other dependencies on that. And if we've got our business running well and agile and we're running an effective, efficient business, strictly speaking, our normal run rate should be just in the green. We might say, we're going to allow 5% variance to cope with the ebbs and flows as they go across in our period. And that might make sense. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point would be that your upper and lower bounds of normal should be in green. You might just dip your lower bound of normal into the amber, but this is our normal run rate. This is how we work. So the challenge that you face with businesses or that businesses face is that when you're in the green, like here, in our gross profit margin, say, and let's pretend this is saying orders shipped on time at 77.47%. And we can see that the goal is 74.75%. So we're less than 3% over, okay, But I've seen enough times with enough businesses that we've got a downward trend. There's 4 days downward. What are we doing to change this? What are you doing? And that's where the KPI is then driving negative behaviors, because we've already built this is how our business runs. This is what we do. For me, if I'm the manager of the warehouse, well, there's nothing for me to do. We're well within our normal ebb and flow pattern. I'm doing nout because everyone's fine, and I'm not going to jump up and down on my team and say, "Oh, Charlie, stop having that cup of tea, get the work done," right? That's counterproductive when the team are doing what the team are supposed to do by every other measure that we've got. And even our own measure is saying we're green. But the behaviors of management, and senior management especially, can be very led by this, should we say, there's four data points in a row in a downward trend. That suggests there's a problem. And the reality is it doesn't suggest there's a problem, because we're still within normal. And the problem and the involvement of senior management should really kick in as we're going through amber. And this is one of the things where I say, well, you need to be aware of your behaviors, what you're presenting, what you're showing to people. And this is, again, why we keep saying that a big part of getting your KPI strategy right and getting your data strategy right is that you need to progress now into a more data culture environment, as opposed to the more traditional data siloed environment where we've got our data, it's ours, you want it, we'll give you a little bit, right? And it's a very different mindset to a data culture, which is about saying we share our data across the business. People know what's going on. People are aware of what's happening because, well, they know anyway. They're doing the job. They know. In a data culture, they'll know, well, boss, right, the way I package these things, if we could change it a little bit, can I maybe get a tape dispenser so I can just pull that out and or one of them tape guns, round me boxes, packaged, right? And, oh, that's a novel idea. How much are these tape dispensers, right? And that data culture mindset helps, because if you just goes, "Oh, gaffer, can I get a tape dispenser? One of them tape gun things." The guy's like, round me boxes, and it's done, right? The invariable response would be, "Well, how much is that going to cost us?" And a data culture example would be a case where we'd look at it and we'd say, okay, we can use a little bit of process mining. It typically takes us, because at the moment we've got to pack the units, and then we pack the units into boxes. So there's all those need to be packed. And depending on what you're doing and size of boxes and things like that, it is going to save us X amount. This is how long it takes us today to do that activity. Let's say 17 minutes with a tape gun, right? Oh, the time comes down to 13 minutes or 12 minutes or 10 minutes. So that's a saving, and would mean that of the times that we do 100 of those a day, we can now do 120 a day or 130 a day. So we get through more throughput, we can ship more product. Instead of it being about that sounds dead good, right? You can start with a data culture to drive it more into what does it mean for the business? What's the business outcome of everything? And that's really the point. And data cultures, they're not new. The principles of the Kaizen principles that really kind of started a lot of this from the 70s. So not that new. Okay, so have a think about it, because it really changes the mindset once you start to include everybody in the data. So what about this KPI dashboard? Okay, numbers I've said enough times, try and avoid it. Right? It doesn't drive good behaviors doing things like that. Okay, Power BI has some great ways of doing things. So one of the things you can do is we can switch to something more like this, okay, where we've got the spots. And all I've done is I've taken the chart they had before and I've just laid it out quickly. It's a bit rough and ready, right? If I was doing this professionally, I'd be doing it a bit neater, okay? And we'd do something where we'd put in like a hover, an on hover visual that would show you the numbers and potentially even show you the trend so that when you hovered over it, you could see the detail. But the idea being that you have to take that decision that you want to see that next level down. So the at a glance principle is I can see at a glance, if we remember that gross profit margin is our orders shipped on time percentage. Right. It's green. Brilliant. Fantastic. Because remember, if it's green, it's nothing to be seen. Okay? Words to live by. If it's green, nothing to be seen. And that needs to be the way that you get people to work. The reason, okay, that you will find that people will not want that and will want to go back to having the numbers is because you will have made invariably the classic, and it's a difficult one because it makes sense to do and you understand why it's done, but then at the same time, when it breaks your business, you have to think, okay, and that is you've associated your bonus structure with your operational KPIs. Right? And you go, well, that makes sense. Why would I not do that? And you say, well, it makes sense. The reason I would say not to do it is because when you come here and you go, right, our on-time percentage, if we're a good, agile business, as I said before, our normal operation run rate, going back and thinking in terms of control charts with an upper bound and a lower bound for what's normal, where are we normal? Think of it's your mean and your standard deviations, yeah? So how far away from our average is normal for us to go? Yeah, your standard deviation. So your lower standard deviation line, where is that going to be? Right? And if you're linking it to your AIP, right, or to your annual incentive program, to your bonus structure, you're almost saying my lower normal performance has to be in the green. And that's a difficult one because one of the things that you want as a continual service or as a continual improvement organization is to try and narrow that lower band. Okay, so we want to narrow that. We want that to become a tighter banding as opposed to it being like a big wide thing. You want narrow, right? And most businesses will be, for something like packing metrics, it'll be quite narrow. That's fine. But when it goes, and that happens, what you end up with is your average might be this 77.47. So let's say our average is 77.5% on time, okay? That's our average run rate, okay? And we're saying we've got 75.75 before we're saying, well, we're amber now, you guys are messed up. So our bonus structure is saying you need to stay above that. But if our lower limit, lower bound, lower standard deviation line, whatever you're going to call it, for your control chart mindset, if our lower boundary is, let's say, 74.5, we're operating normally, doing what we need to do, above the line where we'll be for most of the time, but the expectation is we're affecting people's bonuses because of that. And that's where it stops driving. It stops working when you get to that mindset, okay? Because it then becomes about we need to focus on what's green, and if it's gone red, well, potentially it's kind of lost already. We're going to do some things to make the red back, but we're going to focus on keeping things green. And we shouldn't be focusing on keeping things green because that should be what we normally do. So what do you reckon then? The realities of KPIs and of your business metrics is that they're a very difficult thing to understand. You need to think through the psychology of what is happening. This isn't about just numbers. This is about psychological natural things and behaviors that are deeply ingrained in humanity. This isn't something that this one person's terrible. Okay, you do your research. Okay, you go through, you look into some psychology in the business world and things like that. Okay, and you find out things like terms like ethical fading, all sorts of things like that. Okay, those people aren't bad people. Those are people pushed into doing bad things, and it's invariably by badly thought out KPIs. So when you look and you see and you go, people are doing this, it's doing really bad. Okay, time and again, it's bad KPIs that have driven it. So it is key. You need to think, when we put in place metrics and KPIs and think through everything, are we making sure that we, as senior management people, if we are senior managers, I don't know, I might be, you might be, Steve, Jeff, Fred. Okay. If you're a senior manager, is this presentation of a dashboard, is this request for a dashboard that I'm making going to compromise my business, is a question. Do I need to see a number, or would it be better to see a disk or or something else? You can do unichart characters in Power BI, put like little crosses in, you put little question marks, but ticks, right? Color them in, do what you want. I mean, avoid disks, I would say, for colorblind and for inclusivity things, but the principle is the same. You kind of got to think through, what are we presenting? What do we want to do? Okay. And as you build up your KPI structures, you need to make sure they are supporting the data culture aspirations that you should have for your business. And those are going to be underpinned by trust, because that's really where it comes down to. If you're saying, I don't trust my teams, right, which is kind of what you're saying when you're going, well, what are you doing about that number where it's gone down 4 days in a row, right, and it's still within normal bounds? What are you doing? That's saying, I don't trust that you can do your job. Okay. If you're saying, well, we've hooked AIP to it and we've done this, you need to think, is that going to drive a good behavioral outcome, or is it going to drive a bad behavioral outcome? And you'd be almost better hooking your AIP to stuff that's almost secret and that the management teams aren't aware of how it's fully calculated. Because if they are aware, it's natural human instinct to make the metric. And that's the key. It's, natural. I want to make the metric. Nobody wants to turn around, well, we failed. Right? No one wants that. Right? I don't want that. You don't want that. Steve, Jeff, Susie, they don't want that either. Okay? We want to be winners. I want to be a winner. Hey! Okay? And so I'm going to do everything I can to make my KPIs. And that's where these negative attitudes come from, because it's not possible. Ethical fading starts to creep in. Okay. And we get all sorts of that. And time and again, when you go through and you look at these studies and you look at companies that have been caught out, companies that have been fined, look at anything like that, and time again, it's down to KPIs. So I hope you understand, I'm a big fan of KPIs, but they need to do the right things. I support you and your businesses and what you want to do with them, but you need to make sure that those KPIs are also going to support what you want to do and how you do it. Yeah. So don't forget, right? Come back on Friday, so for the weekend. Right, we've got some great videos coming through. It'll be the last one on the New York Yellow Taxi stuff. Brilliant series of stuff. Hope you go and check out the article where you can then have the link. Go and look at the free report. It's brilliant. Have a great week. Take care. Ta-da.